Hi, my name is Draft. I'm a Shadow Priest main, and today I'm making this video to help people adjust to the newly buffed legendary in 9.0.5, Shadowflame Prism. Now, in this video, I'm going to be going over the single target opener and rotation as a nightfae Shadow Priest, and I'm going to touch a little bit on the talents that you want to run in raid and the conduits, as well as if you should be making this legendary in the first place. So, what are my credentials for this video? First of all, I've been Mythic raiding as a Shadow Priest since Mythic Battle of Dazara Lore and BFA. And for this current raid tier, my raid team finished US 65th. And on Warcraft logs, I'm currently ranked 22nd in the world for Shadow Priest for All-Star points. And you should really take that with a grain of salt since it's early in the patch and those rankings are going to be fluctuating, as well as the fact that some really good Shadow Priests don't public log currently. Anyway, I'm going to get right into whether or not you should be making this legendary if you are a Shadow Priest. So first of all, what legendaries can we make as Shadow Priests for PvE content? Currently, there's only 4 big ones that you would even want to look at, and that is Shadowflame Prism, Talbadar Stratagem, Twins, and Eternal Call of the Void. So, if you do primary Mythic Plus content and raid content, the short answer to this question is you should 100% make Shadowflame Prism. It is excellent in Mythic Plus, and it's going to be probably one of the most used legendaries for Mythic Plus pushing next to Twins. And the reason why I'd say for the normal player you want to craft Shadowflame Prism over Twins or Eternal Call of the Void, even though Eternal Call of the Void has really good synergy with Searing Nightmare, it's going to be less overall damage. And for some keys where there's lower mob counts in between like the big mob count pools, so like let's look at the other side for example, you're doing like really high target mob pools in the Ardenweald zone where Searing Nightmare is going to be really good, and also on the platforms. But when you really get down into some of the pools in like the Mechagon area, the target counts don't get nearly as high, and that's where Shadowflame Prism is really going to rise, and it's going to help your overalls over Eternal Call of the Void, which is just proc based and much more RNG. So, how would you play Shadowflame Prism and Mythic Plus? You're going to be weaving in your Searing Nightmares with your Shadowflame Prism opener for mob counts from 6 to 7 mobs or less. And once you get to the 8 to 9 target mobs or higher for those pools, you're just going to want to only Searing Nightmare. So what does it mean to weave in your Shadowflame Prism? It just means you're casting your Mind Blast and your Shadow Word Death in between Searing Nightmare casts and just pretty much putting them on cooldown. Anyway, aside from that, I'm going to be mostly covering the single target opener and rotation rather than the AoE rotation, but I just thought I'd touch on it a little bit for those who are looking for reasons to craft this legendary. So for nightfae in raid, Shadowflame Prism sims the highest on single target, and that's because you're getting more void forms, which means more Mind Blast charges. Now, that being said, it is not that far off from Talbadars on single target for other covenants. It's maybe a 20 to 30 DPS loss, so if you're doing both content, M plus and raid, it's a very good legendary for both. And it's not that much of a damage loss in raid as well. So you should 100% make that legendary. Anyway, that's just touching on it a little bit. What slot should you craft it on? I prefer the head. It has more stats than the gloves, and you're going to want to craft it with haste and mastery. Obviously, if you don't have very good gloves, you can craft it on the gloves if you have a good headpiece. But this is my preferred slot. It just has more stats in general than the gloves would on 235. So let's go ahead and get into our single target opener and rotation for nightfae, which is the covenant I am. So that's what I'm going to show you. And first of all, I'm going to talk about our soulbinds and conduits for raid and M+. So you're pretty much always going to want to go Naya, and that's because the mastery is very strong, and you're going to go double potency because these are going to be your best talents for single target and just any raid content in general, any cleave. Burrs isn't very strong because it's, first of all, RNG proc based, and second of all, some boss fights you're moving the boss around a lot, and that can make it so that your Burrs don't attach to the boss and you're missing out on a lot of damage. Secondly, we're going to go into our talents, and these are my preferred single target talents, or not the preferred, these are the only single target talents you can go for raid when you're using Shadowflame Prism, and that's because you need Mindbender for Shadowflame Prism so that you can have more rifts in general, since it procs with your Mindbender while your Mindbender's out. That's how it works. Whenever you cast Shadow Word Death and Mind Blast, while your Mindbender's out, it slashes the target with a Shadowflame Rift. So you need to have Mindbender. And obviously, Auspicious Spirit's really good for single target. Hungering Void, very good for long boss fights or long encounters in general. And then Fortress of the Mind, just more damage. So I'm going to go straight into our single target opener. I'll also cover a few variations to this opener that are going to min-max your damage a little bit more if you care about that. But for now, I'm going to go into my preferred opener. So first of all, you're going to precast Vampiric Touch. You're going to precast it just under 2 seconds on the timer for your pre-pull timer. Then you're going to go into Shadow Word Pain. Then you're going to pop Fey Guardians. Then you're going to Mindbender, Shadow Word Death, Mind Blast, and then you're going to pop PI in your Ruby and go into your Void Eruption. And you can also pop your Int Pot with PI and Ruby. And then you Void Bolt, then you're going to Mind Blast, then Devouring Plague, then Void Bolt, then Mind Blast, then Devouring Plague, then Void Bolt, and you basically repeat that, casting Shadow Word Death on cooldown, and Mind Blast on cooldown is basically essential to the rotation with Shadowflame Prism, because while your Mindbender's out, you want to be casting Shadow Word Death on cooldown, these things on cooldown, to help proc more rifts and increase the duration of your Mindbender. So first, before I show you this opener, here in a couple seconds, I'm going to tell you why I pop things where I do. PI and Ruby, you want to make sure you have your Ruby just before a Void Form. That way, your Void Form is going to extend to the longest duration possible, since your Void Form is increased with Hungering Void every time you get a crit with Void Bolt. So it's essential that you have your Ruby activated during Void Eruption. And as a Shadow Priest, you 100% need to have a Ruby always. It is one of our best trinkets, so make sure you get your hands on one of those if you don't have it already. And obviously my opener is going to be using the Ruby as our base on use trinket. Other trinkets as well, the opener might vary a little bit, but in general, you want to be popping your trinkets with your Void Form. That's where you're going to be doing your most damage, or, well, what pairs up with it best. So I pop mine with PI because I'm lazy, and I just have PI and my trinket macro together. Another variation you can do to this opener is you can pop your Ruby earlier, like right after you pop your Mindbender. What is this going to do? It's going to make it so that you have your Ruby activated with the crit for your very first Void Bolt. So it's a little bit of min-maxing, and it can make it so that your first Void Bolt crits and increase the duration of your Void Form a little bit longer. That's not really essential to the opener, and I prefer just to pair my PI up with it. And the other thing too, some people like to pop their pots and their PI after you Void Erupt, so that you're getting the full duration during your Void Eruption, which is your big damage CD. And this is probably going to net you more damage than my opener, so you can do that if you want. Like I said, I'm just lazy. I have these whole macro together so that I'm not pressing extra buttons. So there you go. That's the variations of the opener. Another quick question I'm going to answer. Why are we popping Fey Guardian so early? We want the mastery bonus with our Mindbender. So that way it just does more damage. And you don't want to pop your Fey Guardians during Void Form or after the Mindbender, because that's a wasted global that you could spend increasing the duration of your Mindbender using the new legendary, or a wasted global that you can spend on doing damage inside your Void Form. So here I'm going to show you my opener which I should still have on the screen. This is the opener that I'm going to be performing for you guys. So here goes. We cast Vampiric Touch, Shadow Word Pain, Fey Guardians, Mindbender, Shadow Word Death, Mind Blast, PI Trinket, and Pot, Void Bolt, Mind Blast, Devouring Plague, Void Bolt, Mind Blast, Devouring Plague, and then you just continue that basically for the entire opener. And you're casting your Shadow Word Death when it comes off cooldown, Devouring Plague, Void Bolt when it comes off cooldown, Mind Blast when it comes off cooldown, and then you Mind Blast again, and there you go. So a couple things, when you're inside Lust, you should be able to get a third Shadow Word Death off if you hit a certain haste percentage. I think people were saying it was like 27% haste. You should be perfectly good for that. Probably even less than that, especially in Hero. So you should be able to get a third Shadow Word Death off in your opener, and your Mindbender is going to last a lot longer, and your Void Form if your opener is with Hero. So that being said, that is my preferred single target opener for Shadow Priests, and those little variations I talked about earlier could net you a little bit more DPS, but again, it's marginal. So for the average player who doesn't want to min-max like 3 DPS or something, or 10 DPS, or even less than 10 DPS, then you can go ahead and open with this opener and you should be fine. So I'm going to touch a little bit on the rotation just with the new legendary. Some people probably don't know about, and especially as nightfae, because lining up your cooldowns is very important as nightfae, and it's hard to gauge when you should and shouldn't be popping things. So first of all, a lot of people have been asking, should I be lining up my Mindbender with my Void Form? Because as a Nightfae Shadow Priest, your Void Form lasts approximately a minute and 10 seconds, depending on when you pop your Fey Guardians. So, should you be lining them up? Well, it depends on the fight length, really. And also, there's a couple other things too, like if ads are spawning at a certain time on the boss fight, you might want to have your Mindbender and your Void Eruption for that, or just your Mindbender. But in general, basically what I'm going to touch on is your normal fight times. So let's say the boss fight is 4 minutes long. If you cast your Mindbender on cooldown, you would get 5 Mindbender casts, but the fight ends at the 4-minute mark. So your Mindbender gets absolutely no value at all. You don't even get to get any riffs off of it. The fight just ends, right? At 4 minutes, since Mindbender is a 1-minute cooldown. Now, your Void Form, you're going to be getting your 4th Void Form at approximately 3 minutes and 30 seconds. It's probably going to be a bit later than that because in your opener, obviously, you're not getting as much value from the CDR from Fey Guardians. So let's say it's going to be 3 minutes and 34 seconds. Well, you're basically going to get maybe not the full duration of that Void Form, but pretty close to the full duration. So if you pair up your Mindbender with that Void Form at 3 minutes and 34 seconds, you're still getting the same amount of Mindbender cast in a 4-minute fight. And you're getting to pair it up with the Void Form so it does more damage, since you're getting extra Mind Blast charges from Void Form. So, again, it varies with fight length. And obviously, there's a lot of other min-maxy things you could do, such as figuring out how to pair up your mastery bonus from Naya with your cooldowns better, rather than just casting Fey Guardians on cooldown. But basically, what I'm going to say for the average raider who just wants to do damage, doesn't want to min-max super hard, is just kind of mythic raiding casually, you could just pretty much put everything on cooldown after the opener. This is going to net you pretty reasonable damage, but aside from that, if you do want to min-max, you need to be looking at your fight timers and you need to pre-plan ahead accordingly, such as for that example. Because if the fight had been 4 minutes and 30 seconds long instead of just 4 minutes in my example, you should be casting your Mindbender on cooldown, because that means you're going to get 5 Mindbenders rather than just 4 with the 4 Void Eruptions. So As you can see from that example, it's a little bit complicated, but really all it means is you just need to pre-plan the fights, and if you're progging those fights, look at people's prog logs and check to see when you think popping your cooldowns would be more beneficial for your raid team. Now, aside from that, like I said, the important thing to remember is to always be casting your Shadow or Death on cooldown with when your Mind Bender is out. Sorry, I'm stumbling on words, but that is the biggest thing, is just making sure that you extend the duration of your Mind Bender. A couple other things too that are situational. So let's say you have a Void Bolt charge ready to go, you have a Mind Blast charge. Let's say you have 2 Mind Blast charges ready to go. This is kind of unrealistic, but let's say maybe there's some movement on the fight and you couldn't cast your Mind Blast. And your Mind Bender is out, Shadow or Death is on cooldown, but your Mind Bender has a low duration on it. Let's say there's only 2 seconds left on your Mind Bender. Should you Void Bolt or should you Mind Blast? Even though normally, with the normal Shadow Priest rotation, you want to Void Bolt on cooldown always. Well, if it means that the duration of your Mind Bender is going to end, then you want to pop your Mind Blast instead in this situation. So you want to make sure you're always extending the duration of your Mind Bender and not losing any extra duration by casting something else. So in that scenario, you would cast both charges of your Mind Blast, probably back to back, so that you don't global yourself out of missing a couple extra seconds on your Mind Bender and a couple extra riffs. That's going to be more damage for you. So that's an important thing to remember when using this legendary. Aside from that, it's pretty easy to use. It's a lot more forgiving too for movement. Obviously, if you fuck up your opener, you're going to lose a lot of damage since this legendary is a little bursty. But you don't have Void Torrent, which means you're not planted for 3 seconds. So on a lot of mechanics where you have to move, it's a lot easier to move and you're not going to lose as much damage, such as canceling your Void Torrent, which is like a big damage chunk loss when you're using Talbadars. But yeah, that's just a couple of things that I want to touch on when using this rotation. Like I said, you want to be casting your Devouring Plagues before you overcap on Insanity like a normal rotation. And really, the important thing is just extending the duration of your Mind Bender. If you can cast everything on cooldown and make it last for as long as possible, you're going to be getting a lot more damage out of that. Anyway, that's the single target opener and rotation. I tried to touch on as many things as possible that I could think of while making this video. And if I missed anything, please let me know in the comments, and I'll try to answer you as best as I can. My in-game name is Draft with 2 T's on the server Stormrage, so you can message me in game if I'm online. And sorry for the lack of visuals in this video. I'm kind of new to making YouTube videos, and I thought I would just make a video on the single target opener with this new legendary because a lot of people have questions about it and are having trouble adjusting to it. And hopefully this helps someone. And if it did help you and if you're looking forward to more content, please subscribe and like the video. But other than that, I will try my best to help you guys out with any questions you might have, and hopefully this was helpful for you in raid. Thanks, and have a good day.